Good evening and welcome to our Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 meeting. It's our regular meeting of the Board of Education. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Briner,
Here.
Mr. Buckley,
Here.
Mrs. Hassan,
Present.
Ms. Jisling,
Present.
Mr. Tuttle.
Present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, and again, this is our February 9th, 2021 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education is now called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. I would like to welcome everyone to the February 9th regular meeting. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for the review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval via the district's paperless Board of Education agenda system, Board Docs. The public can access the agenda through the school district's website. The agenda is available through the district's website for meeting public viewing the Sunday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and chief financial officer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. This meeting is being video conferenced live and can be accessed at www.youtube.com/user/Cardinal TV Mentor Ohio. Tonight's meeting will not have public participation. The public can email the board members, superintendent, and chief financial officer with any comments and questions. Email addresses and telephone number can be found on the website, www.mentorschools.net. This meeting is being televised on a delayed basis and will be shown on Spectrum Cable, channel 1026 in Mentor and channel 1025 in Mentor on the Lake. This meeting is also being videotaped and will be shown on our YouTube channel, Cardinal TV Mentor Ohio. Please join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of James Caruso. Thank you. Next, we will have approval of minutes. This is for our regular meeting. I'm sorry, this is including our organizational meeting on January 12th. There was an amendment. Also, our tax budget hearing on the same date and our regular board meeting as amended on January 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckley,
I need to abstain. I was absent.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes. Thank you. And superintendent's report and recommendations, Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I have the following recommendations listed under the consent agenda and recommend approval of items 5A1 through 5A3.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, I have the following Board of Education policy listed on the agenda for a first reading. Because this is a first reading, no vote is necessary. Madam President and members of the board, I have the following Board of Education policies listed on the agenda for a second reading. And I am recommending approval of all policies.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of the following new AP Social Studies textbooks.
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
yes,
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of agenda item C1 related to certified personnel and C2 through C6, all related to human resource matters. I'm also recommending approval of agenda item D related to administrative personnel.
so moved,
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckley,
yes,
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes.
Thank you. This concludes my portion of tonight's agenda.
Okay, next we have Board of Education report and recommendations. Is there business?
Yes, I'm requesting authority to conduct an auction for used surplus equipment, primarily used laptop computers, projectors, and computer printers no longer used or needed by the school district.
So moved.
second,
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
yes,
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.
Yes. Anything else? Thank you. And legislative report, Mr. Tuttle.
Oh, thank you. I want to apologize that we once again had to send that out after the board agenda had already been posted. I got my report Friday late, probably about 4:45. So it missed my deadline and my deadline to submit it once again. And let me start by saying there's quite a few new points on this legislative report. I compared it to back February 2020. In February 2020 was very light. This one seems to be a little more aggressive, more things presented, 2 sentences summaries, which don't go too far in depth, but some of those things will move forward, some won't. So let me go with the February 2021 and start with Governor Mike DeWine signed an executive order on January 22nd, 2021 that implements budget reductions for the fiscal year 2021 and partially restores funding cuts made to K-12 education in that fiscal year. K-12 foundation payments were cut by $300 million in 2020, and districts continue to see reduced foundation payments in 2021. This executive order will make the net reduction for federal fiscal year 2021 $140 million, restoring $160 million back to the districts. So hopefully, Dan, you've seen that money is coming back.
Yes,
Only a portion of that, obviously not all of it coming back to us, would be nice. Moving on. I'm not going to get into the governor establishes vaccination schedules. We know that already. We've been involved, and Mr. Wade has been coordinating that very well, the best he could for the dates in which are provided. I think he's doing a great job communicating and coordinating. I'd like to compliment him on that work. I'm so happy he's back. Governor DeWine also unveiled executive budget proposal. He started the budget process for fiscal year 2022-2023 biennium by announcing his executive budget proposal. It focuses on getting Ohio back on track, helping the state to recover as we emerge from COVID-19 pandemic. It provides an aggressive plan, this is what he says, to accelerate economic growth and ensure economic vitality by making targeted investments. Education-related investments for 2022 and 2023 include roughly $13.4 billion in total disbursements from the Ohio Department of Education. Student wellness and success funds will continue to receive funding totaling $500 million in 2022, $600 million in 2023. The recently approved federal K-12 stimulus funds of $2 billion and the $1.6 billion to support child nutrition are also incorporated in the budget numbers. The executive budget proposal does not include a school funding formula. As I will point that out to you later, who's working on that, one of our local legislators. Next. I don't want to go through all these. There's so many bullets here. I think if you've read them, some are going to move forward, some may not. But I would like to point out that kind of interesting topic that I hadn't seen before in House Bill 48, introduced by Reps. Romer and Pavliga, to expressly incorporate changes in the Internal Revenue Code into Ohio law as it relates to changes in federal adjusted gross income that impact school districts that levy income taxes. So the reason why I just read that is because it addresses school districts that levy income taxes. Obviously, that doesn't include us, but there are school districts that do that. And farther down the list, there's also been Senate Bill 18, introduced by Rogner and Schaefer, to expressly incorporate changes in the Internal Revenue Code into Ohio law as it relates to change in federal adjusted gross income that impacts school districts. So that's getting some visibility. I'm not suggesting that we need to do that, but perhaps consideration or thought or conversation could be made about that. Again, I'm not promoting it, but if you other five want to talk about that, certainly in the future. Kind of interesting too, like I mentioned, 1 and 2 sentence targeted subjects on this. Forgive me for mispronouncing the name. Stoltz Fuss, Republican from Minerva, to enact the Safe Women's Sports Act to require schools and public and private colleges to designate separate single-sex teams and sports for each sex. Again, I have no comment on that. I'm just pointing that out that it was in there if you didn't read it and notice it like I did. And then House Bill 66, introduced by Hoops. And it doesn't say that's a organization. Perhaps, Dan, you might recognize that name. Is that a politician or an organization?
I believe it's an organization.
And so introduced by Hoops to require the state's tax expenditure report to include information on property tax exemptions and requires a periodic review of each property tax exemption. Again, someone's looking at give backs, paybacks, exemptions permitted. Don't know the purpose of that, but it's kind of interesting that that's the first that's popped up. Dan, have you seen that before?
No, I stand corrected. That is a representative from Napoleon, Ohio, over in Northwest Ohio. But
Okay.
no, I have not seen it before. This appears to be a new initiative.
Yeah, and I think there's several new initiatives on this list that
Yes, indeed.
we'll see more of those, or it's quite a start, I think, to the new year, I think, in my opinion.
Yes.
It's like firing away, boom, boom, boom. So if anybody else has anything that they've read and you want to mention, feel free to do so. Senate Bill 22, introduced by Senators Terry Johnson and Macaulay, to establish Ohio Health Oversight and Advisory Committee to provide legislative oversight of the governor's executive orders and certain public health orders. Okay, you recognize that, right? Anybody? So that's a good thing, I believe. It's in the past, it's been one person and not our legislators' involvement in dictating those types of things. And I think that legislative oversight is critical. And here's another one, I think, the first time I've recognized this. Brenner, a Republican from Powell, has proposed to expand the income tax deduction allowed for contributions to Ohio's 529 college savings plan to include contributions to 529 plans established by other states. So it just seems like let's take care of the money that goes out of the state as well as the money here. Give them credit for it. Let's keep the students in Ohio. I think by giving away the money and saying, okay, put your money in the 529 in Indiana and take your students there. I would personally promote the students stay in Ohio. That's just my opinion. And then back to the cameras on the buses. Senate Bill 23, introduced by Senator Teresa Gavarone of Bowling Green, to expressly allow the use of cameras for images and videos of illegally passing a stopped school bus and establish a civil penalty when a driver who illegally passes a school bus cannot be identified. So reading between the lines, I'm guessing that means whoever owns the car is going to get fined. I see noddings of the head. It's like, can't identify the driver because he or she's got a mask on, for one, right? I'm thinking that's the issue that's brought up, or maybe it's already happened and they can't stick it to anybody. They want to stick it to the car owner. So again, there's all sorts of shots in here. And there's some good things. There's some good things, but new things. That's it. Any other comment? Any input? Nope. Okay.
Tom or Dan, what's your feeling on the discussions of the fair school financing discussions? I know that law didn't make it out of the lame duck session.
Right, it passed the House of Representatives. The House Speaker, Cupp, is one of the primary authors of the Fair School Funding Plan. The stumbling block before was in the Senate, where the Senate indicated they needed more time to study it and perhaps commission some special reports. And in fact, they've begun to do that through the Department of Education. I think the funding plan goes a long ways to addressing the constitutional issue of funding a classroom teacher, recognizing that's the most important element in a quality education for students, and utilizing student-teacher ratios differentiated between primary, elementary, middle school, and high school years, and then also funding some other critical services like student health and well-being, counselors, nurses, psychologists, and also building administrators. So I do believe it addresses almost all of the constitutionality questions and is a more rational way to help ensure there's funding for a quality education. The trick is the phase-in period. As originally discussed last year, it was suggested there be a 6-year phase-in period. And in the early years, our district would not receive any additional funding. But by the time it's fully phased in, it would be more funding for us also. But again, it's kind of a dual purpose of what's it mean to us, but also are we having a rational constitutional system of funding K-12 education for the entire state? So I think many of us are hopeful that the some of the concerns the Senate expressed last fall and early winter are being addressed now, and they're still, we expect it's going to make it through the House. There's some indication that the House may try to move it inside the budget that goes to the Senate. There's others saying it'll stay a standalone bill as House Bill 1. But in either case, I think ultimately it's better for us and it's better for K-12 education and will make us constitutionally acceptable.
Thanks, Dan.
You know what? There's this point in here that I didn't cover, and that was House Bill 1, introduced by Reps Jamie Callender, our one and only from Concord, and Rose Sweeney, to create a new school funding formula. Sweeney's from Cleveland, so they're putting their heads together.
Yes.
A Democrat and a Republican. I guess that's good, but here it is. Somebody else getting in the mix, going to work on that school funding formula. Who knows where that's going to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hoping forward.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just gonna add one. So I attended a Board 101 workshop a weekend before, and they were talking about one of the current issues, which is HB 436. It's about dyslexia, and Bill or other board members may already be aware, but this was a new thing that I didn't know before. They're planning to start a screening of dyslexia in the school in 2022-23 calendar year. And the professional development of the teachers is going to be coming soon too. So just wanted to share what I learned in the workshop.
Thank you.
Well, that's very good, because that topic actually was reported briefly in my legislative report, I believe last month.
Oh, okay.
That topic had come up and moving forward. So yeah, it's good.
Directive
One of the
412.
One of the problems with the label dyslexia is whoever's doing the workshop, or again, now going to ask the school system to screen for it, is dyslexia can be defined as a neurological issue. And I can't think of anybody on staff that would be qualified to do that kind of a screening. It's usually a pediatric neurosurgeon. But in the educational literature, dyslexia is described, and then there are a list of symptoms that are identified with interventions that are then supposed to be implemented. So I hope they clarify the process before it becomes mandated, because it's going to, there's a lot of research that's conflicting both on the educational side as well as the neurological side. So once again, nothing's easy.
Yes.
I feel like they were talking about the professional development of the teachers. So I believe like it's like a first screening. If the teachers notice something, and that will be the case, and then they can recommend, which can go to the neurological testing kind of stuff to the pediatricians. But like how we do the eye screening at the school by the nurses, and then if something in then they ask the parents, say, go ahead and have it checked by the eye doctor. So that's my understanding of like how the process is going to be look like. But I'm pretty sure like the teachers, they're not going to train the teachers to just fix the whole thing, or like they're really, that's not, they're not subject matter expert in that case. Like teaching is their subject. So, but that was my understanding. I feel like this is how maybe they approach it, but anything can change, as you mentioned. So
Right. Well, and teachers that have their masters in reading are trained in dyslexia screening in terms of identifying symptoms and providing interventions. And I'm guessing with the heavy reading instruction and staff development that Mrs. Bonas has done, that I bet there's a lot of our mentor teachers that already have that in place.
wow, very nice.
It's very good.
Anything else? Okay. Good discussion. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle.
Thank you.
Moving
You're welcome.
on. We have Chief Financial Officer's report and recommendations. Mr. Wilson.
Yes, I'm presenting agenda items 7A through 7F for approval, and I'd like to offer a couple comments before the motion. The financial statements indicate that we're moving along primarily as planned. We did make a correction on a typo on a monthly variance for payroll and sent that out. But overall, spending continues to track to budget at an expected level. Income is about where we expect it to be. There's a minor timing issue with taxes being received, but it looks like we're on track for this year. The last item in this section is the annual February request for approving new rates for our liability, fleet, and casualty insurance, including cyber liability. Unfortunately, we again are suffering the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. While we've maintained our regular schedule for getting the quotations in and have everything totally buttoned down to present to the board at this meeting, we are still awaiting several of the final premium cost estimates. Our insurance renews March 1st of 2021. We have, since predating my time with the different district, used Love Insurance Agency to annually test the market, ensure we're getting the most competitive pricing, analyzing our coverages to ensure we're adequately covered to the risk tolerance that we've traditionally held. We're hoping on Thursday of this week to get the final numbers. I'm asking tonight that the board authorize me to approve the placement of insurance coverages effective March 1st, 2021 at all the current coverage limits, and that I be required to provide you a notification prior to the end of the month. And then we will bring forth a ratification request at the March meeting. But we certainly don't want any gap in insurance coverage. But unfortunately, our choices are this, or if the board prefers, a special meeting sometime later in February once I have final numbers. So I was trying to avoid an inconvenience for a special meeting for this sole purpose, but that is the other option. So tonight, my request is to authorize me to proceed with ratification next month.
That's
Dan.
fine.
Dan, we have worked with Love for many years, correct?
Yes.
All right. And I know that this type of insurance is specialized and there's not a whole lot of brokers out there that do this. You will apprise us of any changes. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes. Right now, I have a meeting scheduled this Thursday, late morning with Jim Love in hopes of having all the final information received. And as soon as I get that, I will communicate to the board. At this time, none of the insurers have indicated that they're going to mandate a change in coverage limits or coverage amounts. We do know that our cyber liability coverage will change carriers. The current coverage carrier has declined to quote on a renewal. We're looking at the other top-rated insurers in that market area. So my hope is that sometime Thursday, no later than Friday, I can report to you our placement and the premium amounts and compare them to last year. And if not, then as soon as we receive them, but certainly before the end of the month when we need to have the renewals completed.
I would agree. I think it's important we don't have any gap in the coverage. So I'm comfortable with that if everyone else is.
Yeah, I am.
Sure.
Seems fine. Mhm.
So moved.
Hey, go
Second,
ahead.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
yes.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes,
Mrs. Briner.
Yes.
That completes my agenda items this evening.
Thank you, Dan.
thanks, Dan.
Next, we have unfinished business. Last month, there was a proposal to change our board meeting dates for the year of 2021 from the second Tuesday of the month to the second Monday of the month. I'll entertain any discussion on that topic.
That conflicts with the Mentor Schools Foundation schedule.
Correct. Anything else?
You know, I was in my personally, you know, my schedule can be flexible, but I've been thinking about the community expectations, and it's always been, that's the meeting date that's been there. And I think it's easier to continue that just because of change is always a process and it's difficult. We have to work around the city meetings. Some of the organizations have set their meeting dates, you know, a year in advance, so that becomes difficult. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that although Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson are graciously willing to, you know, up the prep time for the board meetings, I have to tell you that when I worked at the board office, depending on what business had to be brought to the board, that was it was a time crunch and everybody was moving around rapidly and sometimes it was stressful. And personally, I don't think that Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson need any more stress in their lives. So although I know they both would be gracious to do it, but I know I just know how much work prepping for the board meeting is. So I just like to add that.
I'm not clear, Ambreen, why did you want to change? Why did you ask for the change?
I can send it in an email. I'm just like I just don't want to say it here. But it's not a big deal. It's fine. It was just a kind of proposal because Mondays will work a little bit better than Tuesdays. And I know sometimes our meetings are like really go till 10 o'clock. So Monday was just like a better option, but it's fine. It was just a proposal if everybody feels that day works better for. I wasn't aware about all the things like how we schedule, but I agree that since it's been for so long on Tuesdays, people are used to, and they remember that in that head. So, which is fine. So not a big deal here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? Okay, should we go to a vote then?
We previously voted no vote is needed if we're not going to change any meeting dates.
Okay,
Okay, so do we agree there's going to be no change then?
Correct.
no change. Yes.
Okay, all right, then if we're ready to move on. Was there any other unfinished business? All right, moving on, new business?
I just have a couple of curriculum questions. And I just read this article tonight. So Mr. Porter, and if Barb's or Mrs. Bonas is listening, I don't need any answers. But I was reading in Cleveland.com that Governor DeWine has asked school districts to come up with a plan to address the coronavirus learning loss by April 1st. And the article cited the data they're using was the kindergarten readiness data from fall of 2020 and the grade 3 language arts scores. And my question is, how are Mentor scores? Does that fall in line with that? Just what's the data? What's the issue? And the other point is, if sometime in the future, if we could answer the question, I know Mrs. Bonas has a lot of local assessments. If we could just to address the question, how are our student achievement levels compare? Did we lose because of coronavirus? Was there a differential with online teaching versus in person? Just that kind of consideration. I certainly don't expect there would be any answers to those questions tonight. But I was a little surprised that Governor DeWine proposed this, and I'm guessing there's no money that goes with this mandate as well.
I can begin, and if Barb may have something to chime in as well. We've already begun talking actually about, especially summer programming. And as we talked in team recently, we all acknowledged there needs to be something deeper that reaches more of our learners, because we're anticipating more gaps than usual. In some of the assessments that I'm aware of, we've seen some, in some regards, we're a little bit behind. I don't think we're as far behind as some of the other districts. That being said, we know we have coming up a DLT meeting, which will deeply measure all sorts of assessment data. And it's sort of our, middle of the year benchmark check. We also do one at the end of the year. But this is going to give us our first really good glimpse of where we are with math, with reading, with other types of assessments, including even climate goals. So all of those things are going to be on the table. I think that happens next week, Barb, if I'm not mistaken. But we've also started talking about an investment. We're going to have to make a little bit of an investment in the summer for students. One thing I can say we're staying pretty strong with, and Ms. Bonas and Mr. Lynch, who are on the call here, you get a lot of credit for this, is we've been working to really track students' grades. So the letter grades are important in terms of keeping those up, keeping the performances in the classrooms, but we also need to measure, their overall performance against some standardized assessments as well. So we've begun looking at all of that. And I don't know if I missed anything, Ms. Bonas.
No, I think you're correct, Mr. Porter. Our DLT meeting is coming up in about 2 weeks, and we will be looking at all our benchmark assessment data. And we also have a Bright Bites data suite that we're rolling out too, which is going to really help analyze that data, not only the state data, but also our benchmark data. So we're really excited about that.
Well, it sounds like, and I'm not surprised that you're on top of this. And I'm happy to hear that what you're proposing is a triangulation of the data and looking at all viewpoints. So I'm glad we're in good shape. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's something that everybody's concerned about, I think, nationwide. And I'm delighted that when I had mentioned something similar to Mr. Porter earlier this week about, making up those gaps. I remember, Ken, you saying some months ago that bridging those gaps where students have fallen behind for whatever reason is what we do as educators. And I love that perspective on it. It's a problem we know how to solve. We've got lots of tools in the toolbox, and there may be some cost involved, but I think it'll be well worth it. The other thing that I'll be interested to know is comparing the great experiment of distance learning using an online approach for our whole district at various points. How did that pan out? We were experimenting with some online classes for our 9th graders, getting them acclimated to that would be part of the future that they would know as learners. And how well have we done that? And I think, like Mr. Porter was saying, I think in general, we were well prepared for it and put a lot of energy into doing the best possible job. And I'm proud of what's been accomplished. But there are gaps, especially for students, maybe at-risk learners, various individual cases, and trying to figure out the best approach to make that work. And I love the idea that students who were having grade issues, that was addressed early on, and interventions and additional support were offered for students as needed, rather than waiting until everything was in a tumble and trying to fix it then. So thank you so much to the team, to Bill, for your leadership. And I'm excited to see what the results will be, that what we've learned about what we've done.
Anecdotally, I think we've learned certainly most students will perform better when they're in school regularly, although there are some students who actually have performed better virtually, but they're more the exception than the norm. Also, I have to give a lot of credit to our administrative staff, our teaching staff, and our classified staff, a lot of our classroom assistants. Folks from all of those groups have had a lot of contact with the home end, particularly when we went into remote. And that happened through phone calls, that happened through Zooms, that happened through emails. People were reaching out to students, people were reaching out to parents to try to keep our students engaged with the learning. And so it's really been an effort all the way around.
Good question, Ken. Thank you. And thank you both for being on top of these things. We appreciate that. Anything else? All right. Guess we will move on. We are going into executive session. We will be discussing employee negotiations. Do we expect that we may be taking a vote?
I don't believe so, and I'd ask that we, just to allow full conversation, expand the purpose of executive session to discuss employee negotiations and employment of public officials.
Okay, thank you.
And
And
again,
do we get,
unless Bill has other indicators, I don't believe there will be any action other than to adjourn after the executive session.
all right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
And please take the roll.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
yes.
Mrs. Hassan,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner.